Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to touch on if you should have a meal plan or follow an if it fits your macros approach, and basically compare the pros and cons of both approaches. So first of all, to quickly kind of go over what both a meal plan and macros are. A meal plan is just having set meals on a daily basis, which is simply following the exact same food, exact same kind of for every single meal, both on training days, non-training days, or your high, low, medium days, depending on how someone's got their diet set up. And in terms of like a meal plan, you could obviously have like rotate veggies here and there and still kind of class it as a meal plan, but it's basically just trying to have pretty rigid food choices day in, day out. And you've also got the ability to obviously just track macros themselves. So macros, or a calorie and protein target, is basically, well, first of all, macronutrients are your protein, fats and carbs, and they are basically the three food groups that make up your food. And it's basically when you hit the same target, so you might have a protein target, a calorie target, or you might have a specific protein, fat and carb diet, or target, sorry, and you'll basically hit the same targets daily through different foods, however, so you won't be eating those same exact foods on a daily basis. And there's pros and cons of each. And the pros of, let's say, something like a meal plan is when you're following a meal plan, you've got the time efficiency aspect of it. So that's personally why I like following a meal plan. See, when you're like on MyFitnessPal, logging exactly what you're gonna have for every single meal, it takes up so much time, which is just an absolute ball ache for me, in my opinion. So I prefer to just know exactly what I'm eating every single day. And the benefit of that with the time efficiency is there's no planning involved. You know what you need to buy every single week. So I rock up to Aldi on a weekly basis. I'll whiz round Aldi. It takes me 5 minutes unless I get distracted looking at the middle aisle on some air fryer or some mad other gadget or thing I don't need that I don't end up buying anyway. So it saves you a lot of time, and you know what you need to buy, creating predictability with knowing you've got enough food for the week, knowing what you need to hit your goal. And also it helps from a stress management point of view due to being more time efficient, as I touched on. And also it's good for hitting your macronutrient and micronutrient goals effectively, because if you there's like much more predictability. Like that's what I say with my clients who struggle to hit their protein goal. Like I'll say to them, right, you're definitely not having enough routine daily, because if you hit your goal Monday, Wednesday, and then Saturday, why didn't you hit your goals the other day? You've obviously got your diet's obviously completely different those days. So, because if you know something hits your goals, the benefit of a meal plan is you just repeat it and you know it's going to definitely tick that box. So it leads to a lot better time efficiency and predictability with the accuracy of you hitting certain goals. Not only that, but your ability to digest your food well. And reason being is your food choices aren't flipping on its head on a daily basis. So your digestion will be predictable, which will mean your ability to utilize and absorb the food you're consuming is going to be in a good spot. Also, performance will be predictable because you're not going to have digestive distress going into sessions because you're eating the same thing pre-workout. You know you're going to have enough carbohydrates in certain meals and something that will digest at a good pace to promote good performance as well. And it also creates predictability. Like I said, with just knowing you've got enough ingredients to last you that week or whatever desired time frame you have went to the shops for. And you've also got the accuracy component. You're less likely to mistrack certain foods if you're consuming the same foods on a daily basis in comparison to if you are doing a macros approach, because you just literally have a plan and then just follow it. Super, super simple. And I'll obviously get to the cons of a meal plan in a bit. And I'm going to touch on the pros or the positives of tracking your macros. And the pros are flexibility and therefore sustainability. The two obviously go hand in hand. And what I mean by that is if someone's, let's say, following and eating the exact same foods daily basis, their ability to adhere to that over time can sometimes be poor, and as a result, we know adherence is key when it comes to making progress over the long term. And obviously, progress very rarely happens short term. Yes, you can lose a bit of weight in a week or 2 weeks, but all progress with fat loss and muscle growth generally happens over the mid to long term. So when you think about putting a goal in place, you want it to be sustainable over the mid to long term. So the flexibility and sustainability can lead to better adherence. And it also can allow better variety, which can mean potentially less likelihood of developing intolerances, and as a result, they're gonna be able to can digest whatever food they're having more effectively, not run into kind of issues with their digestion down the line. And also, it means they can potentially have more micronutrients in their diet if the meal plan doesn't, and if they have quite a lot of flexibility with food choices. For example, if someone's, let's say, following a macronutrient approach, they're really good for getting their fruit and veg in, they just choose different ones daily, then they might have potentially less gaps in their nutrition, and they might potentially have a greater array of micronutrients there. Also, another benefit of it is it doesn't encourage an all or nothing approach. So when someone's consuming, let's say, a meal plan, and then they are away somewhere or something comes up, something I've found with some clients is when they don't have access to certain foods, they then just kind of go completely off. They don't think, I can make up ground here. They just go off plan. Or if they don't know the calories in their meal plan, they won't kind of factor in the calories. They'll just kind of go off plan. So it can encourage a bit of all or nothing approach, and it's for some people isn't that sustainable over the long term. And another benefit of it is you get awareness of what foods are higher and lower in calories, and you just get knowledge on certain foods. For example, if you follow a macronutrient, this is why, like, I think for most people who have like a healthy relationship with food, it is good for most people to go through a period of tracking, because if someone tracks, they can then find out and work out what foods for them are filling, what foods aren't filling. They can work out for them what foods they are high in protein, low in fat, low in carbs, what foods are high in carbs, and what foods are high in fiber, which we know contributes towards satiety. What foods are lower in fiber, which might be more ideal in a pre-workout setting if food's extremely high, or if they're eating immediately before the gym, or if their hunger's low. So it gives you the awareness and knowledge of certain foods, which can be a great benefit of following a macronutrient or a protein calorie goal approach. And as for like the potential cons of a meal plan, obviously these will go and tie in hand, like the cons of or the pros of a macronutrient or following your macronutrient or protein calorie goal will tie into the cons of a meal plan, etc. But the kind of potential drawbacks of a meal plan that we're considering is if it's lacking certain micronutrients in your diet, like if someone's never getting maybe vitamin C in their diet, or if someone's got a meal plan and they've not got any vitamin D, or sorry, not vitamin D, vitamin C or iron in their diet. Iron, B12, some you get from like red meat. So if they've got, let's say, no red meat in their diet, then they'll consistently not be getting that micronutrient in, which will mean they'll be more likely to be deficient in it because they're never really getting it in their diet because they're always having a lack of it, if that makes sense. And also, like I said, adherence is not for everyone. People get bored, people like that variety, and it helps them stay consistent over the long term. And we know reaching your goals is a marathon, not a sprint. It can also be the fact that you have intolerances as well from like hammering the exact same foods every day. You can potentially develop some intolerances in your diet and not be able to therefore digest certain foods well, like over the long term, which can be a downside. And a benefit of a meal plan that just came to my mind actually is food waste. Like I have like next to zero food waste pretty much, just because my fruit and veg I buy mostly frozen. I'll freeze the chicken once I've cooked it. I'll use oats, rice, almond butter, dark chocolate. So there's nothing that really goes off in my diet, or nothing that's stopping me being able to kind of or yeah, there's no waste, there's no money spent or wasted, which can be another benefit of it as well. And in terms of the downside of following like a macronutrient approach potentially is you're winging it. Like if you're eating completely different foods on a daily basis, like there's such a lack of predictability, which I see in clients' ability to reach their goals, and that's why again routine's so important. So as a result, like you're gonna have days where you're low on your protein, you're under recovered. You're gonna have days where you've not had enough carbs going into your sessions. You've had days where you've had too much carbs going into your session. You've had days where maybe you've had too much fat going into your session, so the food digests too slow, which kind of goes hand in hand with it. Also, you'll have maybe potential digestive issues because you're having completely different foods daily. You're sometimes going to have foods that will digest well. You're going to sometimes have foods that don't digest well. And you will, therefore, again, we know our digestion plays a large role in our ability to absorb and assimilate nutrients, and can also affect things like your performance, just overall how you feel on a daily basis as well, which we obviously don't want. And also with the macronutrient like approach, inaccuracy is something big with your ability to reach your goal, but also with tracking. Like, see if you're eating completely different foods every meal, the chance of you mistracking something is going to be far higher. The same applies if someone's, let's say, following that approach, like their ability. The reason being is, as I commented on in a different episode, food labels have like an accuracy rate of like 20%. So even if you're tracking things as accurately as you can, but you're having completely different food choices daily, that's going to actually have a knock-on effect on your ability to stay accurate. And it can also be more time consuming as well, because you don't have as good a routine on the go. So it's going to mean you're potentially needing to spend a lot of time in the kitchen some days, or you're going to be just on the MyFitnessPal app a lot longer than you need to be. Whereas if you follow a meal plan, you know exactly what you need to cook, exactly how long it will take, you know exactly what foods you need to buy, so you're not wandering around the shops. You don't need to go to the shops multiple times a week because you know how much you need for a week's worth of shopping. So it leads to, again, just more time efficiency. And we know, obviously, sleep's important when it comes to our health and fitness endeavours. So if we can allocate time towards more sleep, we can allocate time towards having better recovery, and as a result, making more progress. And overall, like if it's time consuming, it could potentially have a net negative impact on our stress, and as a result, our ability to recover and again get good sleep. And another potential downside of like just following macros is poor hunger management. Like there's less predictability with your ability to manage hunger. If someone's got a meal plan and they know the food definitely manages their hunger, they know it suits their needs, all they need to do is rinse and repeat daily, and they know they've got predictable hunger management. Whereas if someone's, let's say, on the opposite end of the spectrum and they have, let's say, completely different foods, they might have something that's pretty, that doesn't really satiate them, like cereal for breakfast, then overeat when it comes to lunch and dinner, or maybe have something for lunch that's, let's say, they're following a if it fits your macros approach or a calorie protein target, and they have a McDonald's. Yeah, it fits within their calories, but then what negative effect does that have on their ability to manage their hunger for dinner? Very poor. What it might then cause them to then crave certain foods and then have a lack of ability to adhere to their calorie goal at the end of the day, because they've kind of they've unlocked that craving of, junk food, which then means they'll reach for more junk food throughout the rest of that day. And another downside of like a macronutrient approach, you can tell definitely hate a macronutrient approach, with all the negative I had. But another downside of it is a poor ability to monitor our scale weight. So when we're consuming different amounts of fibre, which will be in things like oats, different veggies, fruits, when we're consuming different amounts of obviously weight in food, different amounts of electrolytes, which you will find in certain foods as well, there'll be a poor ability to predictably monitor scale weight, because all those things will be impacting your weight on the scales. which can then mean it's hard to assess if we're in a deficit, if we're in a surplus, or if we're at maintenance with our calories. Obviously, over the long term, like averages will tell us, which is obviously the good thing about taking an average, but just bear that in mind, it can skew your scale weight to a negative degree. So, based on what I've touched on, what should we settle on in terms of what approach we follow? So, adherence should come first. So, what we should stick to, or what we can stick to over time's the priority here, as most other goals are. After we've considered adherence, we want to consider if we are following maybe like a macronutrient approach, or an if it fits your macros approach, calorie target, however you want to phrase it. You want to have some element of consistency. So it's a balancing act. And what I mean by that is if we're following a macros approach, we still don't want to have completely different foods every single day, because again, it leads to a lack of predictability and a lack of consistency. So instead, like if you're following a macros approach, like a blend of both's probably a good place to be, which means having some similarities, having some structure, but then, you know what I mean, swapping things in here and there. But just because you follow like a calorie target doesn't mean you need to have things completely different. If you ask anyone who's really successful with their nutrition, bodybuilding, fitness endeavours, I guarantee you, even if they have a meal plan, even if they have macros, they've both got a good bit of routine on a daily basis. It doesn't need to be completely different. But what you can do as well, which is quite a good option, is if you get bored of eating the same foods, have different templates, have different options to follow. So have, let's say, 2 breakfast ideas that are 500 calories, 50 grams of protein. Have the same for dinner, and that means you've got that flexibility, allow you to maintain good adherence, but you're not totally winging your ability to reach your goal. So a blend of both's a good place to be, and having some variation with meals here and there. So hope you enjoyed the episode and you found it valuable. Any support is massively appreciated. It gives me more incentive to keep pumping these podcasts out for yourself. And if you did enjoy it, any story tags on Instagram, any comments are greatly appreciated. If you did enjoy the episode, comment what you prefer, if it is macro tracking or if it is having a meal plan and why, or just comment macros or meal plan to help the algorithm. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.